In the pre-dawn hours over the North Atlantic, a lone convoy of Allied ships cut silently through the fog-laden waters. The sea stretched like a black canvas, broken only by the faint glimmer of lanterns and the low hum of engines. Beneath them, in the cold and silent depths, a German U-boat prowled like a predator. Its captain, trained in years of naval warfare, waited patiently, knowing the convoy's movements, yet still uncertain of what lay ahead. Above, the skies were equally tense. Enemy aircraft might sweep in from the horizon at any moment, unseen in the dim light, their shadows indistinguishable from the clouds. This was the reality of World War II, a battle fought not only with guns and torpedoes but with signals, waves, and invisible eyes. For centuries, naval warfare had relied on sight and instinct. But by the late 1930s, the sheer scale of modern warfare rendered those methods obsolete. Submarines could vanish beneath the waves, and aircraft could strike with lethal speed from miles away. The Allies knew that survival depended on detecting the enemy before the enemy detected them. This realization gave birth to a new kind of weapon, one that did not fire bullets or shells but waves: radar and sonar. Radar, short for radio detection and ranging, was born from decades of scientific exploration. Scientists discovered that electromagnetic waves could reflect off solid objects, allowing distant ships or aircraft to be seen even in darkness or fog. Britain was among the first to turn theory into battlefield reality. The Chain Home system, a network of towering radar stations along the coast, could detect incoming German bombers hundreds of miles away. During the Battle of Britain, this technology transformed the Royal Air Force from a reactive force into a preemptive one. Pilots scrambled with minutes to spare, guided by information invisible to the naked eye. Radar had created a new sense, one that allowed humans to perceive threats beyond the limits of natural sight. Meanwhile, submarines lurked beneath the waves, exploiting the silence and darkness of the oceans. Germany's U-boats were devastatingly effective, sinking thousands of tons of Allied shipping. But beneath the surface, another technology was emerging to counter them: sonar. Known as ASTIC to the British, sonar sent pulses of sound through the water. When these sound waves hit a submarine, they bounced back, revealing distance, direction, and even speed. It was an underwater eye, listening where no human could see. Convoy escorts, equipped with sonar, could now hunt U-boats with a precision that had been unimaginable a few years earlier. Yet technology alone was not enough. Radar and sonar required skilled operators who could interpret blips on a screen or echoes through speakers. Training became a race against time. Young officers learned to read signals, distinguish false echoes, and anticipate enemy maneuvers. Ships that lacked trained personnel could be almost as vulnerable as those without the technology itself. It was a battle of minds as much as machines. The Axis powers, of course, were not idle. German engineers developed Medix radar detectors, allowing U-boats to sense when Allied ships were tracking them with radar. They experimented with Alberich coatings, rubberized skins that absorbed sonar pulses, rendering submarines nearly invisible beneath the waves. Each new innovation by the Allies prompted a countermeasure, and each countermeasure demanded a fresh solution. The Atlantic had become a chessboard, with sonar pings and radar sweeps replacing knights and rooks. Even on land, radar revolutionized air warfare. In the Pacific theater, American forces faced Japanese aircraft that could appear over islands with deadly speed. On carriers, radar operators could detect incoming planes beyond visual range, giving fighter pilots precious minutes to intercept. At night, when visual spotting was impossible, radar became the difference between survival and annihilation. Bombers relied on it to navigate hostile territory, while anti-aircraft units used it to track trajectories with unprecedented accuracy. Radar transformed the skies into a landscape of signals, a world where invisible waves dictated life and death. The story of radar and sonar was also one of human ingenuity under pressure. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, scientists worked around the clock to miniaturize radar sets for aircraft. In the North Atlantic, sailors learned to combine sonar with depth charges in innovative patterns, anticipating the evasive maneuvers of German U-boats. Every new development was tested in real-time battles, sometimes with catastrophic consequences. Lives were lost, but each failure informed the next breakthrough. The war became an accelerated laboratory for electronic warfare, with the ocean and sky as testing grounds. One famous encounter illustrates the stakes perfectly. In 1943, a U-boat wolf pack attacked an Allied convoy near the Azores. Under cover of darkness, the submarines struck, sending torpedoes into the crowded supply ships. But unseen radar from a distant destroyer had already tracked their approach. Simultaneously, sonar operators in nearby escorts listened intently, detecting the telltale pings of submerged vessels. Depth charges were dropped, torpedoes avoided, and the convoy escaped with minor damage. To the sailors aboard, it seemed like magic. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. To the commanders, it was the precise result of months of training and technological innovation. By 1944, radar and sonar had become standard equipment on almost every Allied ship and aircraft. Their influence extended beyond immediate military outcomes. The technologies inspired strategic decisions at the highest level. Convoy routes were redesigned, naval patrols optimized, and air defenses coordinated in ways previously unimaginable. Commanders no longer relied solely on scouts or intuition, they had electronic eyes and ears guiding every decision. The invisible battle was no longer a gamble, it was a calculated, measured fight, waged across frequencies and echoes. Yet, even as radar and sonar gave the Allies an edge, they were not invincible. German U-boats continued to sink ships, and kamikaze pilots in the Pacific sometimes overwhelmed radar warnings. Technology could extend human senses, but it could not replace courage, ingenuity, or the unpredictable chaos of war. Every operator, every sailor, and every pilot remained part of the equation, proving that even in a world dominated by electronics, human skill remained irreplaceable. By the end of the war, radar and sonar had fundamentally changed naval and air warfare. The oceans were no longer silent, and the skies were no longer blind. Convoys traversed waters once considered death traps, aircraft struck targets with unprecedented accuracy. Submarines, once hidden hunters of the deep, faced new vulnerabilities, and entire campaigns were reshaped by the ability to detect enemies before they could strike. What had begun as a technological experiment became a cornerstone of modern warfare, a testament to human innovation in the face of existential threat. In the quiet aftermath, when ships returned to port and skies cleared, the stories of radar and sonar remained largely invisible to the public. Unlike tanks and battleships, they left no dramatic wreckage, no ruined cities in their wake. But their impact was undeniable. They had shifted the balance of war, saved countless lives, and rewritten the rules of combat. For every sailor who relied on a sonar ping to avoid a torpedo, for every pilot who scrambled thanks to a distant radar blip, these technologies had been the difference between life and death, silent guardians in a world ablaze. The invisible battle had begun, and by the end of Chapter 1, it was clear, the war would not only be fought with steel and fire, but with waves of radio and sound, measured, calculated, and deadly. Radar, sonar, and the submarine had become intertwined in a deadly dance, one that would define the very nature of modern warfare. The hunter becomes the hunted. The Atlantic was a theater of silence and shadows. Convoys moved like ghosts across the endless gray, escorted by destroyers and corvettes that cut through the waves with a purpose born of desperation. German U-boats, once masters of this realm, had grown more cautious. The Allies were no longer blindly navigating the waters, every movement, every sonar ping, every radar sweep changed the rules of engagement. The hunter was beginning to feel hunted. Early 1942 had been grim. German submarines, organized into wolf packs, struck relentlessly, sinking hundreds of Allied ships in weeks. Supplies of food, fuel, and weapons were threatened, and morale in Britain teetered. The ocean seemed an insurmountable barrier, a graveyard where waves concealed death. Yet, innovation was reshaping the battlefield. New radar sets, smaller and more precise, could now fit onto destroyers and even aircraft. These devices extended human perception, allowing the Allies to detect U-boats on the surface, often before the submarines realized they were seen. One stormy night, a British destroyer named HMS Vigilant cut through fog near the Bay of Biscay. Its radar operator, a young woman trained for months in precise signal interpretation, spotted a faint glimmer on the screen, the telltale signature of a surfaced U-boat attempting to recharge its batteries. Orders were given silently, sonar operators switched to active mode, and depth charges were prepared. The crew moved as one, each man understanding that the slightest hesitation could be fatal. Minutes later, the submarine, so confident in its stealth, found itself under bombardment, forced to dive and flee. This was a turning point. Technology had shifted the balance. Meanwhile, in the air, radar-equipped aircraft patrolled tirelessly. Long-range patrol bombers, known as Liberators, scoured the horizon for submarines. From above, a U-boat appeared as a dark shape cutting through the waves. On board, radar screens displayed its position in real time. Pilots maneuvered carefully, coordinating with naval escorts below. Bombs and depth charges were released with precision, guided by invisible waves. For the submariners beneath, the ocean had become an arena where silence was no longer a shield. Sonar technology advanced in parallel. The Allies developed Hedgehog anti-submarine weapons, which fired a spread of explosives ahead of a ship, allowing attacks without losing sonar contact. This innovation meant that U-boats could no longer simply dive and escape, the water itself seemed alive with unseen threats. Listening devices grew more sensitive, capable of detecting the faintest propeller sounds miles away. Underwater navigation and tactical planning transformed into a game of anticipation and counter-maneuvering. Each submarine patrol became a deadly chess match with waves as the board. German engineers responded with ingenuity of their own. They experimented with snorkels that allowed submarines to run diesel engines while submerged, reducing exposure on the surface. Some boats were coated with sound-absorbing materials, attempting to disappear from sonar. Even tactics evolved, wolf packs coordinated in vast, silent formations, striking convoys in unison. Yet, for every advance, the Allies found a countermeasure. Radar-absorbing panels, electronic jammers, and high-frequency direction finders began to close the gap between predator and prey. The ocean had transformed into an invisible battlefield, dominated by waves and pulses beyond human perception. Life aboard submarines was harsh. Captains navigated in darkness, relying on periscope sightings and intelligence reports. Crews lived in cramped, airless compartments, acutely aware that detection could mean instant death. They could hear the faint ping of sonar, the distant rumble of depth charges, but interpreting these sounds was often a matter of instinct and nerve. The war beneath the waves demanded constant vigilance, technical skill, and unshakable courage. Each dive, each maneuver, was a gamble and often, a fight for survival rather than victory. Radar and sonar innovations did more than influence individual battles, they reshaped strategy across theaters. Convoys were rerouted based on predicted U-boat locations, aircraft patrols extended to previously unreachable sectors, and naval intelligence analyzed every ping, signal, and interception. Battles were no longer merely measured in ship tonnage sunk but in information gathered and processed. Commanders could plan with unprecedented foresight, turning uncertainty into a tactical advantage. One notable encounter illustrates the power of coordinated technology. In late 1943, a wolf pack attempted to ambush a convoy near the Azores. Allied radar detected the formation from miles away. Aircraft flew overhead, forcing the submarines to dive. Sonar operators tracked their movements, guiding destroyers in calculated attack patterns. The result, several submarines destroyed, others forced to retreat, and the convoy passed largely unscathed. Analysts later noted that without radar and sonar working in unison, the operation might have ended in disaster. Waves of radio signals and sound pulses had rewritten the rules of survival. The war in the Pacific also reflected these lessons. Radar-equipped ships and aircraft countered Japanese night attacks, while sonar detected the increasingly stealthy midget submarines infiltrating harbors. In the dense fog of island campaigns, invisible detection technologies became the lifeline between success and annihilation. From the Arctic convoys to tropical waters, the principle remained the same: information, gathered and interpreted with precision, was now the most lethal weapon of all. By mid-1944, the Allies had established dominance in the technological arena. U-boats, once feared throughout the Atlantic, faced catastrophic losses. Convoys crossed seas with far fewer casualties. Air strikes, guided by radar, decimated enemy positions, reducing the element of surprise that had defined early campaigns. Sonar and radar were no longer experimental, they were essential tools, fully integrated into training, strategy, and tactics. Yet, as the Allies pushed forward, the war reminded them that technology was not infallible. Equipment could fail, signals could be misread, and the enemy always adapted. Each engagement demanded human judgment, creativity, and courage. Radar and sonar amplified skill but could not replace it. Victory was achieved not just through innovation, but through the relentless determination of those who wielded these tools under extreme pressure. By the close of Chapter 2, the message was clear: the hunter had become the hunted. Submarines, once masters of the sea, faced unprecedented detection capabilities. Aircraft, once hidden in night skies, were revealed by invisible waves. The ocean and air were no longer neutral, they were arenas defined by information, technology, and the skill to interpret it. Radar and sonar had leveled the playing field, creating a new dimension of warfare, one fought in silence, in signals, in pulses unseen but felt by every sailor and pilot. The invisible war had escalated. The next chapter would reveal how this technological arms race reached its peak, with daring missions, experimental devices, and the final confrontation that would determine control of the seas and skies. Echoes of innovation and the turning tide. By 1944, the Atlantic had become a crucible of relentless innovation. Submarines, once shadows of terror beneath the waves, now faced a reality they had never imagined. Every mission demanded nerves of steel, technical skill, and an uncanny ability to anticipate invisible threats. The Allies' mastery of radar and sonar had matured into a coordinated network, where every pulse, blip, and echo was part of a larger picture, a digital map of both opportunity and danger. For the U-boat crews, each dive into the cold depths was a calculated gamble, a dance between detection and evasion that grew more perilous with every passing month. On board U-564, Commander Reinhardt stared at the dim green glow of his instruments, a nervous tension threading through the cramped quarters. Sonar pings from Allied destroyers were faint, yet unmistakable. Above the waves, radar sweeps continually scanned the horizon, and a single miscalculation could reveal his vessel's position. Every crew member felt the invisible pressure pressing from above and around them. The ocean had transformed into a theater of intellect and innovation, where survival hinged not just on the strength of steel, but on mastery of sound, signals, and human intuition. The Allies had perfected coordinated detection. Destroyers patrolling the convoy lanes were now equipped with high-frequency directional sonar, capable of identifying the precise location of submerged submarines. Radar-equipped aircraft patrolled in grids, their operators interpreting faint reflections from periscopes or snorkels. Every detection was instantly communicated through secure channels to ships and command centers, allowing a rapid, unified response. For the first time in naval history, the hunters truly became visible to the hunted. Meanwhile, technological ingenuity continued to accelerate. The British developed centimetric radar, a breakthrough that allowed ships and aircraft to detect even the smallest metallic protrusions above the waves, such as periscopes. This advancement drastically reduced the ability of U-boats to surface undetected. On the other side, sonar systems were integrated with predictive algorithms, enabling operators to calculate probable submarine escape routes and deploy hedgehogs or depth charges with surgical precision. Each improvement amplified the effectiveness of the other. Radar detected surface threats, sonar tracked underwater movement, and the combination made evasion increasingly difficult. The stakes were not purely technological. Missions became stories of extraordinary tension. In the North Atlantic, the destroyer HMS Meteor encountered a wolf pack attempting to intercept a vital convoy. Radar detected faint blips at dawn, while sonar operators reported subtle echoes deep below. The captain coordinated the attack with meticulous timing. Aircraft circled above, blocking surface escape routes, while destroyers maneuvered to cut off submerged retreats. A series of explosions shattered the water's calm, sinking multiple U-boats and forcing survivors to the mercy of the sea. It was a battle where signals and sound waves determined life or death before a single bullet was fired. Submarines attempted countermeasures, testing the limits of human ingenuity. Rubber coatings designed to absorb sonar, electronic decoys to mimic the sound of multiple vessels, and snorkels to reduce radar exposure were deployed in desperate innovation. Yet, as the Allies' network grew denser and more sophisticated, these adaptations increasingly failed. For every technical trick, a counter-strategy awaited, illustrating the unforgiving speed of wartime innovation. The technological race beneath the waves had become a cycle of attack, counterattack, and adaptation, each step raising the stakes and heightening the drama of survival. Radar's influence was equally transformative in the air. Allied patrol bombers could track U-boats surfacing at night, even in heavy storms. These aircraft often operated beyond the visual range of the enemy, relying solely on electronic signals. A single radar signature could trigger coordinated attacks from multiple directions. For submariners, this meant that every decision to surface, recharge batteries, or reposition carried immense risk. Aircraft and ships had become extensions of invisible eyes, constantly watching, listening, and calculating. The convergence of radar and sonar also facilitated daring tactical innovations. Coordinated convoy escorts were now supported by air patrols, forming a multi-layered net of detection and defense. Early warning radar allowed convoys to adjust routes preemptively, while sonar-guided destroyers intercepted submerged threats. In one remarkable case, a convoy crossing the mid-Atlantic successfully avoided an ambush of 6 U-boats by relying entirely on radar guidance from aircraft and sonar tracking from nearby escorts. No lives were lost, and the incident became a case study in the strategic integration of detection technology. While technology dominated the battlefield, human courage remained the defining factor. Operators worked for hours in exhausting conditions, scanning blips, interpreting echoes, and making split-second decisions that determined survival. Pilots patrolling vast stretches of ocean relied on radar readings and instinct to locate hidden submarines. Sailors listened intently to sonar pings, their hearts pounding with every distant echo. The interplay between human skill and technological innovation created a new type of warfare, one that was as much mental as it was mechanical. This era also witnessed the first hints of predictive warfare, where sonar and radar data were combined to anticipate enemy movements before they occurred. Convoy routes were dynamically adjusted, air patrols redirected, and anti-submarine attacks executed with near-perfect timing. The technology had evolved from detection to orchestration, allowing the Allies to choreograph complex operations with unprecedented precision. Submarines that had once relied on stealth were now trapped in a web of anticipation and calculation, their every move forecasted by the interplay of sonar echoes and radar reflections. By late 1944, the toll on German submarine forces was catastrophic. Losses had soared, and many seasoned commanders were forced to confront the limits of even the most advanced countermeasures. Meanwhile, Allied forces had not only neutralized the U-boat threat but had gained confidence to project power further into contested waters. Radar, sonar, and human ingenuity had transformed the ocean into a space where prediction, speed, and coordination outweighed brute force. The invisible war, fought with pulses of radio and sound, had reached a decisive phase. In the end, Chapter 3 underscores the dual nature of technology in World War II. It was both shield and sword, simultaneously protecting lives and delivering lethal precision. Submarines were no longer the dominant predators of the ocean. Radar and sonar had leveled the playing field, introducing a lethal transparency that left no place for unseen maneuvering. Battles were increasingly determined by the capacity to detect, interpret, and act upon invisible signals. The war had entered a realm where mastery of waves, electromagnetic and acoustic, was just as important as mastery of tactics and courage. The stage was now set for the final chapter, where the combined might of radar, sonar, and human strategy would culminate in decisive operations, shaping the outcome of naval and aerial warfare and demonstrating the enduring impact of technological innovation. The final confrontation and legacy. The war had reached its crescendo. By early 1945, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were no longer vast, unknowable spaces. They had become a network of waves and signals, a vast chessboard where every submarine, destroyer, and patrol aircraft moved under the constant gaze of radar and sonar. The invisible pulse of technology now dictated the rhythm of life and death at sea. German U-boats, Japanese submarines, and other clandestine vessels faced unprecedented scrutiny, and the era of undetected strikes was over. The ocean itself seemed to have become an adversary, turning waves and depths into instruments of detection. In the North Atlantic, a wolf pack under the command of a young U-boat captain attempted a daring ambush against a heavily guarded convoy supplying Allied forces in Europe. Confidence had driven the mission, experience and instinct had been their only allies. But they underestimated the Allies' technological dominance. Radar stations on escort ships detected faint metallic reflections on the horizon, signaling a surface approach. Simultaneously, sonar operators picked up unusual acoustic patterns in the water. Within minutes, the convoy's captain had coordinated a counter-encirclement, using depth charge patterns derived from precise sonar readings. Every U-boat maneuver was anticipated, every evasion tactic neutralized by invisible waves of detection. Above the convoy, radar-equipped aircraft circled like silent sentinels. Their operators scanned not only for submarines but also for enemy aircraft, mines, and any vessel attempting to infiltrate the perimeter. The aircraft's radar pulses bounced off even the smallest periscope protrusions, revealing the presence of submerged submarines attempting to recharge or reposition. Bombs and depth charges were released with exact timing, guided by combined intelligence from sonar and radar networks. Within hours, the wolf pack was decimated, their attempts at surprise annihilated before a single torpedo could reach its target. It was the triumph of coordination, precision, and relentless technological vigilance. Pacific waters told a similar story. Japanese midget submarines, designed for stealth attacks in harbors and narrow straits, encountered Allied forces equipped with the latest sonar systems. The Allies had refined acoustic detection to unprecedented levels, allowing operators to distinguish between natural ocean sounds and the faint hum of enemy propellers. Coupled with radar-equipped patrol craft and aircraft, these systems transformed the operational landscape. In one remarkable engagement near Leyte Gulf, a single radar-guided patrol plane detected a submerged midget submarine attempting a surprise assault. Sonar operators on nearby destroyers confirmed its position, and coordinated attacks neutralized the threat before it reached Allied ships. For the first time, technology had allowed an almost preemptive strike, neutralizing danger through prediction rather than reaction. Submarines themselves continued to evolve in response. Snorkel systems allowed extended submerged operation, and stealth coatings absorbed or deflected sonar signals. Yet, the Allied forces consistently adapted. Centimetric radar and high-resolution sonar reduced the effectiveness of these innovations, forcing submariners into increasingly perilous gambits. Survival depended on ingenuity, discipline, and luck as much as technical skill. Every patrol became a psychological test, a constant balance between bold maneuvers and cautious evasion. The ocean's silence, once a shield, had turned into a constant source of tension. Radar and sonar had altered not only tactical engagements but strategic planning. Convoy routes, previously vulnerable to surprise attacks, were now constantly recalculated based on predicted submarine positions. Air patrols operated in precise grids, ensuring coverage of every likely approach. Anti-submarine destroyers were positioned at optimal angles, guided by sonar readings to intercept even the most evasive submarines. The result was an operational network that integrated data from ships, planes, and intelligence centers, creating a synchronized system of maritime defense. Submarines, once masters of stealth, now confronted a reality where every move was scrutinized, tracked, and countered. The human dimension of this technological battlefield remained crucial. Sonar operators worked in near darkness, interpreting subtle changes in the ocean's acoustic patterns. Radar technicians maintained focus for hours, scanning for fleeting reflections that might signal hidden dangers. Captains coordinated complex maneuvers based on incomplete information, blending instinct with technical guidance. Courage and decision-making under pressure became as decisive as the equipment itself. The war beneath the waves was no longer merely mechanical, it had become a test of mental endurance and tactical foresight, where the pulse of technology guided but could not replace human judgment. One particularly decisive operation highlighted the culmination of this evolution. Allied forces had identified a strategic shipping route near Norway, heavily patrolled by German submarines attempting to disrupt reinforcements. Using long-range radar, aircraft detected unusual surface patterns under the cover of night. Sonar operators aboard destroyers tracked subtle acoustic signatures below. A coordinated strike was launched, aircraft dropped explosives with pinpoint accuracy, while ships engaged submerged targets guided entirely by sonar data. Within hours, the threat was neutralized, and vital supplies reached Allied troops unharmed. This operation demonstrated that the integration of radar, sonar, and human strategy had turned the tide decisively, rendering traditional submarine tactics increasingly obsolete. As the war drew to a close, the legacy of radar and sonar extended beyond individual battles. Naval doctrine had fundamentally changed, emphasizing detection, coordination, and real-time data integration. The success of Allied forces relied not only on brute force but on mastery of invisible waves, electromagnetic and acoustic, that transformed the ocean into an instrument of warfare. Submarines, once terrifying symbols of stealth and power, were now constrained by the ever-present gaze of detection technologies. The psychological and operational dominance achieved through radar and sonar would define modern naval strategy for decades. In the broader context, the technological race highlighted the interplay between innovation and human adaptability. Each advancement prompted a countermeasure, every tactic spurred new defenses. The invisible war beneath and above the waves exemplified the symbiosis of human courage and scientific ingenuity. Victory was achieved not by chance but by the relentless pursuit of understanding, measurement, and precise action. Radar and sonar had not only reshaped naval warfare but also established a paradigm in which information became as decisive as firepower. By the final months of the war, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were no longer domains of uncertainty. Radar and sonar networks provided continuous surveillance, tracking every movement and nullifying surprise. Submarines that had once prowled freely now moved cautiously, constantly aware that detection was almost inevitable. The hunter had been transformed into the hunted, and the age of invisible predators had ended. Chapter 4 closes the narrative of technological mastery in World War II, illustrating how radar, sonar, and submarine warfare collectively shaped the outcome of naval operations. It is a story of innovation, courage, and adaptation, where unseen forces determine the fate of ships, sailors, and entire campaigns. The pulse of detection, once a nascent idea, became a decisive instrument of victory, leaving a legacy that continues to influence modern maritime strategy.